Conflict, one of my favorite topics. The word itself, conflict, raises up in many people a feeling of frustration, anxiety, disagreement, fear, even anger. And in some cases, some people get so emotional about conflict that they just want to avoid it entirely. Now, I want you to take a little trip with me. Picture this. You're sitting in the VP, your boss's office, on the 25th floor with 5 of your colleagues. You're talking about project plans. Your boss starts talking, and he goes and turns, looks at Joe, and starts giving him accolades for the work he did on the project. Well, now Joe is a very outgoing and boastful person. However, he did the least amount of work on the project, and you did the most. What are you feeling? What's going on? As your boss continues to talk about Joe, you really feel the frustration building, the anxiety. Finally, you feel your heart pounding. You've had it. You get up, turn towards the door, walk to the elevator, and press G. You leave the building. Conflict can range from brief, explosive episodes to subtle, long-standing events. Wiley recently did a study of 12,000 employees. And in the study, they focused on conflict. 70% of managers and executives said that conflict negatively impacted productivity. Have you ever been part of a team that was charged with working on a critical project? In the beginning, what begins to happen is collaboration's harmonious, and it's fueled by excitement and anticipation of coming together in a group working on a specific project for the company. People are excited about it. They want to do it. All of a sudden, pressure starts to build as they start to see the deadlines get closer. Frustration starts. Maybe some more stress starts to rise. People start to get into debates heatedly. And then they start to get defensive about their own opinions and ideas, and they won't let them go. One source of conflict, as the late philosopher Martin Buber put it, was to instill our rightness into others. Now, we all want to be right, but sometimes we may not be. When we're motivated to be right, what happens is we stop listening and stop thinking. This results in conflict beginning to occur. There's no open communication. There's no acceptance. Very little learning takes place, and no problem solving. This is the issue that we're in, and the emotions are starting to rise even further. Do you ever hear the saying, all I saw was red? When you're in that state, you're beginning to get angry. You're beginning to stop what's going on. However, conflict can also lead to opportunities. Opportunities for better communications, better collaboration, increased creativity, problem solving, and even the development of trust. Now, I want to help you today understand how to analyze conflict in order to achieve the productive outcomes, the positive outcomes. So what we're going to do is I want you to think about a conflict that you've been involved in, one with some people who are important to you. Close your eyes, take a deep breath, and ask yourself, do I always approach conflict in order to get a positive outcome? You can open your eyes now. What would happen? What would change for you if you understood how to analyze conflict? If you understood how conflict worked? How would you feel if you were able to analyze conflict situations? You understood what conflict was, how it occurs, and why it occurs. What would that do for you? What happens at points like that is once you know this, then you're able to look at the conflict, you're able to analyze it the way it should be, and lead towards productive outcomes. Patrick Lencioni says that what we want conflict to do is to be the productive exchange of ideas and opinions. So how do we do that? Well, let's go back to our story from before. You come back into the office, it's about an hour later. You're still upset, but a little bit calmer. Your boss sees you come in. He comes into your office, and he apologizes to you for not knowing what your contribution was, for not knowing how much work you did on the project. One of your colleagues told him about your contribution. So you continued to talk about it, and the outcome was improved communications between the two of you and a change in perception as well of each other. Far-fetched? Not really. See, that person was me early in my career. And you probably guessed that as I was talking. Then I started to reflect over the next day or two about what had happened. And I realized that even though I acted and left, it could have ended up negatively for me. I could have been written up or worse. So I asked myself, was that the best way to handle that situation? And of course it wasn't. But it turned out for me to be a positive thing. I was fortunate to have a boss who saw potential in me. Lo and behold, the next week, he comes to my office again, and of course I see him, all the time anyway, but he comes to my office and he gives me a new assignment to develop conflict modules for a new supervisory development program. I did my research, I went to some trainings, I learned about the Thomas Kilmann conflict modes instrument, and I learned other techniques for resolving conflict. The result was some pretty strong programs that the supervisors, managers, and officers had gone to, and they were very successful. I learned how to analyze conflict, how to move through it to achieve positive results. And I've been coaching and teaching managers, leaders, and entrepreneurs of small businesses ever since. Now, the key for conflict is to know the parameters of it. What's going on, how it's happening, and how we got into this position in the first place. Now, I also remember when I was in elementary school, they started to teach us about safety and crossing the streets. So it was pretty young, pretty small, all right? And what they taught us was to stop, look, and listen. Do you guys remember that? Yeah? Okay. And that is exactly what you have to do with conflict. You have to stop, look, and listen. Because if you stop, look, and listen, what will happen is you will be able to analyze the conflicts to mitigate the negative results. and focus on the positives if you do it the right way. Because what you want to do is you want to keep your emotions in check. Because when our emotions rise, our brains and logic shut down. So, how do you know conflict's brewing? That's where you got to start first. How do you know conflict is brewing? Well, if we go back to our story, we know it starts in the gut. You're a little upset about something, you're not sure. You start feeling frustrations. Then you get anxious, Then you might get angry. And then you might do some things. So anyway, you know it's coming. The important thing is that you analyze the conflict. Now, why do you need to analyze the conflict and break it down? Because the way you conceptualize conflict, the way you go ahead and analyze it, will influence the actions you take. And for every action you take, somebody's going to react in a certain way. So you want to make sure that you demonstrate to those individuals that you're going to be focusing on achieving desirable outcomes, that you have the intention to have a desirable outcome, a productive outcome for both of you, or for, the groups themselves, if it's a team that's working on it. In order for you to break it down, there are two questions you need to ask yourself. What's the nature of our differences, and what are the reasons for our differences? Now, when you ask what are the nature of your differences, well, they could be over facts. They could be over goals, where we're headed. They could be over the methods, the processes, the steps we're going to take to achieve those goals or objectives. Or they could be over values or deep-seated beliefs. The second question is, what are the reasons for those differences? And the reasons for those differences could be information. Maybe we don't have the same information that we're looking at. Maybe it's a perception issue, where we're looking at something, we have the same information, the same spreadsheet, whatever it might be, but we're interpreting it differently. How many times have you seen situations where two people witness the exact same event, but they walk away seeing something different? Or it could be our roles. A mother to a child, a father to a child, a boss and a subordinate, a vendor and a supplier. I remember when I was an HR director, and when I was dealing with a labor relations issue, I had to focus on it one way. When I was dealing with a non-labor issue, there was another way that I had to focus on. It's all in the role that we're playing. So, once you have that, those two questions, the nature of our differences, the reasons of our differences, then you're ready to deal with the conflicts. And you need to take 3 steps. First, stop or pause before you react. Second, look or observe what's going on in that conflict. Diagnose it, analyze it, using those 2 questions that I gave you. Third, listen and think. Listen to the other person. Listen with empathy. Listen to understand their position as well. By doing that, you will be able to resolve the conflict and take the appropriate action to get to a productive outcome. Now, they say everything is clear with 20/20 hindsight. So, my action step for you guys is to think about a conflict that either you've recently had or one that's still ongoing. Use the 3 steps. Analyze that conflict using those 3 steps. Stop, look, listen. And make sure you get those questions in there as well. Try it out. It may not be perfect all the time. You will get better at solving conflict if you follow it. Remember, conflict is inevitable, and it can be positive if you stop, look, and listen.